Introducing the visitors. We have faculty people, we have John Hanson, Caleb Igo, Zach McCray, Mike Hoffman, Brock Millimaki, and Roger Ferris is our boss, I think. Our administrative assistant, the one that makes everything go, and Andrew Vigilant with the Montana School Boards Association. The reason that we are here, of course, is to discuss the screening of the applicants for the position of superintendent and to try to decide 3, possibly 4 of the applicants that we would like to interview. We had 8 applications for the position. Before I go any further, I think I'll turn it over to Andrew. He'll kind of give us the do's and don'ts. This is the first time in my years of being on the school board that we've done a search process like this. It is a complete public meeting. So maybe Andrew, if you could kind of explain the show to us, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good evening to the Board of Trustees and good evening to everyone else in attendance. I'm Director of HR and Senior Counsel with the Montana School Boards Association. We're proud to bring you this field of 8 individuals who believe they might be a good fit for your superintendent position. With regard to the function of tonight's meeting, tonight is just a screening meeting. So this is not a meeting where you're going to get into detail with regard to the applicants. You do have a matrix that was provided to you before this meeting that summarizes their education and experience. And speaking of education and experience, Montana law provides that a board of trustees as a governmental entity is required to make its hiring decisions on only 2 attributes of anyone who applies for a position for you. And that is experience and qualification. Both of those subjects are safe territory, always perfectly legal and appropriate to comment on someone's history at a university, for example, or their length of service to another school district. Those are subjects that are always going to be appropriate to mention. Contrast those with the moment to the Montana protected classes as defined in the Montana Human Rights Act. Subjects like age, a person's gender, their political ideas, their marital status. Those are subjects that are personal, that could lead to an applicant believing that a decision was made about them for a reason other than experience or qualifications. The other thing to keep in mind tonight is that there's no reason to get into the negative attributes of any of the applicants that are before the trustees. If you guys decide that you want to speak to 3 or 4 of these people, it's best and least risky for the Board of Trustees to keep tonight's deliberations to the positive attributes of those people that you want to speak with. Getting into something negative you may have heard about an applicant or may have viewed on a search engine tonight would be incredibly risky with pretty low benefit to the hiring process. Since we aren't going to get into detail tonight, we're just going to be deciding who the Board of Trustees wants to interview. One more point before I conclude this and turn it back over to Chair Love, which is that where we are in the process is that after you make your decision tonight on who to interview, at that point, we'll go into a 2-week reference checking period where I will be conducting thorough and exhaustive reference checks on the individuals that you decide you want to interview, speaking to their previous employers, to people they work with, to people who sat on boards of trustees to employ them, for example. If any trustee is to conduct their own background checks, it complicates that process. So if someone hears from one of you before they hear from me, it could make them decide that, heck with it, I'm not spending any more time on this. I'm not going to talk to the second reference check. So let's keep things running through the association for the duration of this hiring process. With that, I would feel fine answering any questions from the board at this point, or from Mr. Chair Love.
Does anyone have any questions from Andrew or for Andrew? Any of you faculty people or anyone sitting out here, when you have questions, feel free to ask them of me or of Andrew or whoever, whatever you feel is pertinent. Andrew, do we want to share the names of the 8 candidates? How do we do that?
Yes,
That
so
is a public
the
matrix.
matrix that I've provided to you is a public record. It contains information that one of the candidates have a right of privacy in. So if you think it's appropriate, Mr. Chair, I could send that matrix to your clerk with a few copies. If people don't already have
I
copies.
think that would be good, and the faculty could have that as well. Yes,
Oh, I was just about to ask, the faculty can have that.
yes. You could send that to Suzanne, and we could run some copies to give to at least the faculty people, and those of us on the board already have that. I can, I'll just mention real quickly while they're getting ready. The one candidate is Alexander Ator. He is the superintendent at the town of Roberts over south of Billings. We have a Rodney Gotula. He's an assistant principal at Billings West in Billings. We have Marshall Laggy, who is a science teacher at Fairfield. We have Megan Merrill, who is superintendent of the school Ritchie up in northeastern Montana. We have Josh Patterson, who is superintendent at Brockton. That's up on the northeastern part of the state as well, I believe. We have a lady, Cheryl Peterson, who is superintendent of Drayton Public Schools in Drayton, North Dakota. We have Tyler Rutledge, who is superintendent of, I believe it's CAPAY in Orland, California. And we have a Jeff Wong, who is a teacher and coach at Riverside Military Academy in Gainesville, Georgia. Does anybody have any comments about anybody or would like to say anything to start this thing off as far as what you've learned or what you found out at this point in time?
Regarding a specific person or just in general?
Either. Doesn't matter.
I guess I would just, this is just my experience in hiring positions, you know, obviously I got to be on several search committees at the university, hiring chancellor, the vice chancellor, director of athletics. I've been on many search committees, and I guess I would say, I don't always think years of experience means that they're the best qualified person for the position. And I think that Dillon is a unique place in finding somebody that would fit Beaver County High School and fit this community is equally as important, in my opinion, as years of experience.
Yeah.
So I just don't think we rely just on that personally. We've hired many people who had great resumes that had lots of experience, and they were not a fit for Dillon or Montana Western. And I just have to think that would be somewhere in this scenario that it just
Yeah.
needs
We
to
have
be
to have,
looked at.
in my opinion, have to have someone who's going to be the right fit for us and for the community. of
Without
Billings.
a doubt.
To me is vital. Looking through these, and I guess I can start. I mean, the people that after going through their applications, the people that I reviewed that came to the top in my feeble mind is Alex Ator, who is the
Mhm.
11 years at Roberts, has been superintendent, I believe, 3, and was principal there for 8 years. Prior to that, I believe he was at Shields Valley as a principal. Prior to that, he was at the town of Freud as a teacher and a coach. Another one that I liked quite well was Josh Patterson. He's the superintendent at Brockton. I believe he's been superintendent, I believe, for 3 years. He also was a elementary principal in Miles City, I believe, for 5 years. Prior to that, he was a teacher in Knoxon, teacher and football coach in Knoxon. After that, I guess, I mean, those would be my top two at this point. The gentleman at Billings West, Rodney Gotula. He was a teacher at Billings Skyview for 10 years, an English teacher, and then has been an assistant principal at Billings West for 10 years. He does not have any superintendent experience or any principal experience that I could see. So has no budgeting experience, which is something I feel is important, where I've worked so closely this last couple of years with Megan and Suzanne. We all know how tight our budget is and how important the budgeting process is.
Mr. Chair, I think it's important to clarify, you may have misspoke regarding yours as principal for Mr. Gotula. According to my records, it looks like he's saying 10, but as you say, no experience as superintendent or superintendent / principal, so no budget experience.
Okay.
One could surmise.
Okay, excuse me. That is correct. The other person that I'm interested in, I guess, is Marshall Layden. You know, Marshall is went to college at Western. He has been an educator in Utah and in Fairfield, Montana. However, he has no experience whatsoever. He's not been in administration at all. And I don't believe has applied to be accepted into the principal or superintendent's, what do you call it? Educational leadership field. I don't even think he's applied. Those are who I would feel were my top four. When we talked earlier with the School Boards Association, with our contract with them, we can interview 4 people. Is part of the contract that we have with them. If we interview more than 4, we have to pay more money, which we can do if we feel it's necessary to interview more than 4. If we interview 3, Andrew said we could probably get that done in 1 session. If we interview 4, we would probably need 2 sessions and then a deliberation session to decide who we may or may not offer a position to. So those would be the 3 or 4 that stand out best to me. Anybody else want to go or say how they feel?
Yeah, I think that Alexander Bator, he was kind of on the top of my list. I think, more than anything, I think he'd be a good fit. I think, yeah, he seems, so that would be my number 1, I think. And then I think that Josh Patterson, maybe a number 2. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Kind of like I was basically.
I kind of went that way too, Gary. Alex Ator, you know, might be a good Roberts, Shield Valley and Freud. Got some budget experience and leadership experience and so I would put him at the top of my list, and then I do a Josh Patterson after that.
Okay.
And you know, I've known Marshall a long time and you know, he would have been about my 4th probably. Without, you know, budget experience and leadership administration experience, even though I know he'd be a good fit in Dillon. Then that's Rodney Gotula. I've talked to him on the telephone a time or 2. He a lot of any budget experience that I could see. His daughter's going to come to Western and play basketball for the women's basketball team, I know. And so I kind of went the direction you guys did.
I would agree. I do think it would be worthwhile to bring Marshall in if we can bring 4. I understand he doesn't have administrative experience, but it's not like we've never done that before. And I think it would be worth having a conversation with him because he's a guy that I think could fit this community and he's familiar with it. So I would agree, Alex, Josh, and Rodney are also on my list, but if we can take 4, I would say bring Marshall in. Let's visit with him too. One question I do have if for some reason we decide to bring 4 or 3 or whatever, and we just are like, yeah, these just aren't our guys or gals, can you fail the search, open it back up? What's the additional cost to doing something like that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Anytime prior to the signing of an employment contract, you guys can turn around and start the process over, open the position back up. Given that we're so early in the season right now, I think you could at least get a whole other round of search going on this and still have a pretty decent outlook for getting a qualified candidate in here. The longer you wait to make an offer, the more potential offers are sitting out there. So as you get into the meat of the hiring season, you have the prospect of competing with other districts for the same applicants, which can sometimes be difficult. You sometimes get into a bidding war or, multiple counter offers going back and forth. I think you have a pretty good chance of getting it done with these 8, and I think you should give it a shot. But we can always go back to square one. If you don't find someone that you resonate with during the interview process, anytime before you sign that contract, go back to square.
One thing that can happen is if we did open it back up or extend it, correct me, Andrew, if I'm wrong, but anyone that has applied can withdraw their application if you open it back up. And there is the chance of, I guess to say it in a nicer term, is for hurting someone's feelings, that if you open it back up, maybe that tells them that you weren't interested in them at all,
Right.
possibly, but maybe not, Lori, do you have people that you?
Yeah,
Well-
I agree with Alexander Ator and Josh Patterson as in my opinion, those that appeared to be the strongest. I liked Marshall's story. I don't know him, obviously. I'm not from Dillon, but people speak highly of him. I like the story of him coming through Western. But my concern is the total lack of experience in the role and the potential message that sends to other people. But I think he would be worth talking to, because maybe maybe this is the right opportunity, or maybe there's another opportunity for him, because he would be certainly an advocate in the community, I think.
I think it's clear that Alex and Josh are well above the others in this group as far as reading their resumes. They both have experience in Montana, extensive experience in Montana. Alex growing up here, I assume I recognize the last name. I don't know him, but I do know some Aders in northeastern Montana that I think very highly of. I have no idea if they're siblings or cousins or whatever, but I do think Tanner is certainly very intriguing. Obviously, Marshall, sorry.
That is intriguing too.
Tanner of my sheet. That would not be interesting, no. I've known Marshall a really long time, since he was in college. I was up at the college and coaching when he was playing basketball, so I've known him since for a long time. And my worry for him is I appreciate your thoughts of, are we sending the wrong message? My concern would be, we have a newer principal in Rob, a newer clerk in Susie, and then we have someone in there that's not certified yet as a superintendent. It's a lot of pressure on Rob and Susie as newbies, quote unquote. I mean, relatively new to Dillon. I mean, Rob has tons of experience, obviously, but so that would be my main concern with Marshall and for you guys, you two. You got to help Marshall. Not that you don't already work together, but there's that concern for me, for you guys. It's his coworkers. And Audra too. I mean, Audra's not a newbie, but there's a lot to this, obviously, we all know. And I think the world of him. He would certainly fit into Dillon. There's no question in my mind. And he clearly wants to come back. And I do think we should bring him in. I really do. I think if there's a mentorship, I don't know, like what there can be out there for him to help him, you know. That's my concern for him. I kind of liked the Rutledge guy too from California. He went to college in Montana. But I'm certainly not, he would be at least probably for me after Marshall. Got it right at that time.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same.
I
Yeah,
thought his resume, he was very well spoken there.
Yeah.
His wife grew up in Montana, in northern Montana.
is what he said. He didn't say where.
Yeah,
And that town at Worland is kind of a map is a rural ag community. I mean, it's a little town surrounded by fields. I mean, I just Googled it.
Where he is in California.
Yeah, he's,
Okay.
it is, it's kind of in the Central Valley, part of the Central. It's a little town, farm ground all around it, so it's, you know, I don't think it's, you know, being in California. It's not a,
Sure.
yeah, the metropolitan
Yeah.
areas.
and he went to college in Montana, MSU Billings.
And then he got his in administrative degree at Boise State, did he?
Yeah.
And then went back to his hometown in California to teach and coach and just got into the administrative route. Yeah, I liked him as well. Yeah. It would probably be a fit. Chris?
I think we're all on a similar page. My top one was Alexander. Second was Josh Patterson. Third, I went with that Tyler Rutledge. And then the fourth one was Rodney Gotchula, is what I picked. And I know Marshall Loggy by name. I don't think I've ever met him, but his lack of experience was the reason I didn't put him higher. But I like that we're all, the top two are similar on paper anyway.
That's interesting. In the searches I've been involved in the past, this generally seems to happen. You always have two or three that come to the top for everybody. Some of you faculty members, how do you feel about experience and budgetary expertise and some of those sorts of things? I'd like to hear from some of you folks, because you're the ones who are gonna have to be working.
Find the ones that, when I look at these columns, this year's experiences as a teacher. I find some of those that have more years in the classroom before they went into administration much more intriguing. Because they have been in the trenches where we were and have a little bit more perspective on it, maybe is. Sure, there's a lot of great ones. I appreciate that Megan has been in the classroom for a really long time and knows where we're at, and I think that gives her a lot of perspective, and I appreciate it.
Okay. John, any comments or thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with, I think obviously budgetary is important, but it's important that somebody who kind of knows how the teachers as well. I think it's important. As opposed to just going right to admin.
Audra?
I agree with you too. I do feel like budget is a huge thing. And making it easier. Is talking about, but I did find it nice that someone within the classroom that came in, I mean, Megan just kind of had awareness of what's going on with that. And I just, yes, I am kind of like Roxanne as well. Like, I mean, some people look good on paper and they have all this experience, but is that, it's just hard to know if they think it's Dylan or.
Back, any thoughts?
I think without seeing the resumes, it's a little bit of a challenging
kind of diving into some of that stuff. And so this is pretty black and white stuff when you just look at 8 candidates. A question I would have is, I know that we like split duties between principal, assistant principal. When it mentions like years of experience, would like, for example, Alexander Ator, if that, does that mean that he had 15 years of principal experience before, or is that all just kind of
I
combined?
think that's all combined. I had trouble with that, looking at his resume and whatnot. I think his total deal, Zach, I think is he's got 15 total years
Sure.
in education. I think he was at Freud for 3 or 4 years as a math teacher, and then was at Shields Valley 3 years as a teacher and assistant principal, and then went to Roberts as principal and superintendent.
Sure. Some of those are just kind of shared across.
Yes.
Echoing all the things you talked about, I like what Roxanne said on, experience isn't the end all. I think there's probably some folks in this room that were hired with no experience, and we're so thankful that somebody took a chance on us. So I think that that's worth something. I also, I would just say I like that you guys mentioned the Rutledge guy from California. Scary bringing in an outsider, but you don't know what you don't know until you find somebody who's done it in a different state under different things.
Yeah.
I think that that's intriguing, but in terms of the 1 through 4, I don't feel like I know enough without seeing the resumes to attach something to that.
One thing I don't know if apology is the right word, but maybe Andrew can address that. When we have done search committees in the past, we have had 2 or 3 school board members, 2 or 3 faculty people, generally the district clerk, Audra's position generally, and generally the vice principal. Maybe Andrew, if you could address how that has changed, maybe, and why.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And before we get to that, with regard to these columns regarding experiences, superintendent, principal, principal, teacher, just so everybody is aware, those numbers are self-expressed on the applicant's materials. So they fill those numbers in. I simply transfer the numbers over. It's not like I'm trying to compare or transfer numbers based on their description of a position. They're self-expressed. With regard to the makeup of the hiring committee, association guidance has been consistent that we believe the Board of Trustees is best situated to make the final decision, and indeed required by Montana law to make final decisions about supervision and control of school districts. Typically, what you can run into if you bifurcate that and include other individuals is that there is no legal link between those individuals and the Board of Trustees. So all of you took an oath, right? If one of you says something off color, or if you misspeak, maybe mention a protected class of one of these candidates, that individual would likely have some sort of claim for discrimination against the school district. If someone on a hiring committee who wasn't a trustee or otherwise legally engaged with the school district said something off color, the question would be, in what capacity? So in dealing with these cases where sometimes you will actually have predatory applicants who intentionally provide the seeds of a discrimination case against the Board of Trustees, we found it's more efficient, it's safer to keep the decision to the Board of Trustees. Obviously, everybody in this room has the right to make a public comment. And I know that this Board of Trustees is an engaged community Board of Trustees, and you take those comments seriously, just as Mr. Chair Love has asked for input before the board takes action this evening.
So that is the reason that has changed. I know, like, even as recent as when we hired Rob, I think that committee was consistent. I think there again of 3 board members and 2 or 3 teachers and Audra and Ramona, I think. So it has changed, and it's new to me as well. So, Michael, do you have any thoughts, any comments?
I do. I would say my thoughts are similar to the thoughts of my colleagues, my fellow teachers. And so I would say the ideal candidate, in my opinion, would have several years of experience as an administrator and several years of experience as a teacher. That's the ideal, but
Sure.
I don't know if that's not always, the ideal isn't always possible.
Sure.
The same, might.
I will say of these 4 or 5 candidates, I mean, Alex Ator, like we said, has taught math, I believe, for 4 or 5 years. Josh Patterson. Knox, I forget what he taught at Knox, and he was a football coach and he was a teacher at Knox, and then went to Miles City as a teacher and elementary principal. Mr. Gottlieb has been a teacher. He was an English teacher at Skyview, I believe, for several years, and then has been an administrator at Billings West.
English for Josh.
English teacher, okay. Marshall Laggy is a science teacher and has 18 years of teaching experience. Is that what we found, I believe? Tyler Rutledge, I think, maybe had 1 year of experience as teaching.
This is
Does it say 7? But I think that's total. I don't know. I know in his resumes, reading about it, he got into administration very quickly because he was asked to by some of his administrators because they felt he was someone that should be an administrator. So he got into administration fairly early.
There's multiple subject, 8th grade, 3 years in special ed,
That's right. He was a teacher.
and the AD all at the same time.
Okay.
4 years at Biggs.
Brock.
Yeah, I would echo what you guys have all said. Obviously, in my role, the budget comes with a little more play. To accomplish that. But ultimately, what's the best fit for this school and this community would be my number one concern. Skills are learned through the process. Regardless of where you're at, obviously, you can have a head start on it if you've already done it somewhere else, but you know, what's the best fit for our school?
One of the things that I would say is, to me, the extracurricular part is extremely important. All of these 4 or 5 candidates, most of them were involved in coaching at some point. They have been, student council people. They have been just involved other than just being a teacher or being an administrator, which I think is also something that we need here. We're proud of our extracurricular activities and athletics and Caleb's program and Conan's program. I mean, we need to continue, in my opinion, with someone that can keep all of those things going. And I like the blue banners hanging in the gym, frankly, kind of nice. So those are just some of my thoughts. I guess it's what we need to decide now is, if we want to interview 3 or want to interview 4, and if so, which 3 or 4 that we would like. It seems like everyone would like to interview Alex Ator and Josh Patterson. And probably Marshall Laggy. I mean, is everybody okay with those first 2?
Absolutely.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? Lori, you're okay with that? Whether we want to do 3 or 4, that's up to you guys as a board, and who would be the other 2.
There's no additional cost, whether we do 3 or 4.
No,
No, the only repercussion is that you would likely have to split the meetings, 3 interviews and then deliberations would be pretty lengthy. Although it's possible, if you guys are into the idea of doing that, I'll be there. I'll be here as long as you.
I think we did 4.
so I mean, I'm like Cole and Chris, I also like this Tyler Rutledge from California. I could throw him in the mix from my end fairly easily also.
So can I ask a question about Tyler?
Yes,
If we were to consider him as one of the candidates that we initially wanted to speak with, would we do that first initial conversation virtually versus in person? And if it was done virtually, does that then make us feel differently about whether this number is 3 or 4 or 5?
that's a good question, Lori, and Andrew and Megan and I visited a little bit about some of those things before we had this meeting about whether we do virtual interviews or not. If we have in-person interviews, then do we want to pay X amount of dollars for them to come to Dillon for a personal interview? And some of those sorts of things are things we would need to decide. So I haven't thought of that, but if you interview 2 people virtually and 2 people in person, I don't know if that's fair or not, you know.
Yeah, I would think we would want to be consistent.
Pardon?
I think we would want to be consistent. If we're going to interview virtually, then we interview more virtually, and then maybe you take it down to 2 and you bring 2 in. But I don't think you could do 2-1, 2 or 1.
I don't think that would, how do you feel about that, Andrew?
Frankly, I had always assumed until last season that anyone interviewing remotely was at an inherent disadvantage. But then on one of our searches last year, in a similar situation, the 4th applicant came in, a gentleman from Alaska, and blew everyone's socks off during a Zoom interview and ended up getting the offer. So I don't know if it's always true. I think that you guys have the ability to decide how you want your interviews to occur. Many boards of trustees say in person is the gold standard. We want everybody here in person so we can look them in the eye and shake their hand. And other boards are more comfortable with a virtual option. I see you guys have a perfectly workable virtual option here, but it's up to you.
Do you have the ability to do just like an initial screening, do a virtual interview, kind of get a feel for the candidate and then decide if you want to bring them in? Or does it have to be full-on interview the first time and that's it? There's no other.
So what's going to happen in terms of the timeline after you guys decide who you want to interview? I'll start on the reference checks. In addition to the reference checks, I'll also be providing a bank of interview questions to the Board of Trustees. A huge collection of interview questions that we've collected over the years. You guys look at that, decide which questions you think should be asked, and then send them to me. I'll compile those into a list of interview questions that's provided to the board before the interviews occur. During the interviews, every applicant gets exactly the same questions, the same opportunity to speak to the Board of Trustees. I don't think varying the type of interview would be advisable, just in the fact that you want to be able to substantiate, in case the district has to defend itself, that each of these applicants had exactly the same opportunity.
I didn't necessarily mean changing the questions. I meant, do you do the 4 via Zoom? Same questions via Zoom. You decide if you want to bring 2 in or in face to face. So you do an initial interview, same questions to all 4. And then if you like 2 of them, then you bring 2 in to mitigate that.
It's a possibility. My only concern is that the additional time associated with that. Also, the people who weren't selected to be here in person might be able to suggest that, they had an inferior opportunity with the Board of Trustees. Whereas if you say, base it on the availability of the applicant, like say you have a few out-of-state applicants. If you say, skin in the game, if you actually want to show up to Dillon, you'll get an interview. If you don't show up in person, you don't get an interview. Or if you say, show up if you want, but you can show up by Zoom as well, then the applicant is the one to define that. And the board doesn't have to defend that.
And we don't have to cover the cost of any travel. They would be responsible for their own.
That's up to the board as well. My only recommendation, if you do decide to provide for any travel costs, is to set a capped amount and to have them submit documentation of their expenses.
Consistent.
You would have to be every.
Yes, yeah, the same amount for all.
If you said $500, but if if they came from Bozeman and it was only a tank of gas, they wouldn't get the $500. They would just get what the actual cost was.
Yeah, they'd be required to submit receipts
Okay.
for reimbursement up to account.
But I can see where if you gave him the option of whether they wanted to come and we will pay X amount of dollars if you come, or else we'll do it on Zoom, that at least is treating everyone fairly. Okay.
I don't think there's any reason we don't interview four. That's what we can't. I don't see why we would limit it to three. I think we should interview. four
I think
if
so.
That's what.
Sure.
our contracts.
I agree.
But, you know,
Yeah.
There's no reason not to, in my opinion. 'Cause
I think so.
again, if it's Tyler Rutledge coming from California who's been in Montana, or he could blow us away. You know, I've been a teacher, administrator in the state, but, or someone like Marshall who doesn't have any experience, but several of us know him, and he could come in and just blow everybody that don't know him away too, and be like, oh, wow. If he was number 4 in our thoughts, then, you know, which it sounds like he probably is, just because of the lack of experience. But I just think you have to bring for it, or if it's virtual or whatever it is, but if that's what our contract allows, we take advantage of it.
Okay, is everybody okay with bringing in 4 then?
Yes.
And using the Zoom in-person option, give that up to them?
Let them decide.
Okay. All right, who do we, if we're gonna do Alex Ator and Josh Patterson, who are the other 2?
My votes would, I don't know how we do this, if it's vote, with the Marshall Logley and Tyler Rutledge.
Okay,
I would agree wholeheartedly, the way.
just a minute here, let me, my shorthand's not real good here, okay. The field is, Marshall and Tyler. Mike is Marshall and Tyler?
Seems good.
I'd say Tyler. I don't know if I have a 4. I don't know Marshall.
Okay.
And I'd say Tyler is my third.
Okay. Chris?
And I'm pretty much the same as Cole. Like I said, my 4th one here was Rodney, but I'm not set in stone on that. Like I said, I have no personal connection with Marshall.
Okay.
So
I would definitely say bring Marshall in.
Yeah.
Just looking between Rodney and Tyler, and I think I would say Tyler.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Okay. Lori?
Yeah, Tyler would be my third. And I would just agree with the group on Marshall, let you guys trust your judgment on that.
I am fine with that as well with those 4, so, I agree with. You know, we have the 3 that have some experience and whatnot, and we have Marshall who has years and years of teaching experience and has the connection to Dylan, so I think that's a good group to select. You guys have any thoughts about any of that? Any comments? Tyler was a baseball player, Zach.
Yeah, I'm just from Orland, California, and I can't get over it.
Really?
It's about the same size as Dylan. Yeah,
Your dad's from there?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
like this, so
Where is it
big.
at?
It's kind of northern, central. It's about 30 miles west of Chico.
So that Central Valley is. Where you go.
The northern Reds.
He grew up on a farm, didn't drive a tractor all his life, moved to Dillon, Montana. I would want to fishing. So.
Too far from the fires.
That's really interesting.
The community that burned up was close to there. Here a few years back, up in the woods.
Yeah, Palisades, no. Was it Palisades? Something like that. Paradise, there you go.
Big, he was in Biggs before, that close to.
Bigs for a while, you know.
big than Williams. It must be small.
Played the Chico in junior college baseball, so I know where that is.
Brock or Michael or Audra or Caleb or John, you have any comments or thoughts about this?
It's kind of hard once again where we didn't see the days, but I like the idea of 4, kind of broaden the search and we're gonna trust these guys with these 4. See what they have to offer.
Question, if they come in, do they meet the teachers and stuff like that?
You could certainly arrange those. Typically, there's lag time between the interviews. So when one person is interviewing, if someone else shows up early, we usually set up some sort of touring situation where they can kill some time before their interview slot comes up. Technically, they are entitled to attend the interview of other candidates, but it's a sort of a matter of custom and preference. Generally speaking, candidates don't sit in on interviews of other candidates. So it's nice to have something for them to do if they show up early.
I think that would be an excellent idea.
Oh, I think so
to give
too.
them time with the staff and faculty.
And to see our facilities.
Yeah.
I think that would be important.
You guys would like?
So.
If-
I encourage that. That's that.
If they don't come in person and we're Zoom, I guess the faculty could still ask them questions at that time, couldn't they?
Yeah. So during the meeting where you conduct the interview, and during the period where the board deliberates who to make an offer to, the opportunity for public comment occurs all throughout there. Of course, if someone were to ask one of your candidates a question, in addition to those interview questions that you ask them, they would have the ability to answer, but not the obligation. You're the ones conducting the actual employment interview. Someone else has the ability to make a public comment during the public comment period, but it's not handled in the same way as a question from a trustee that appears.
John sent out an email asking teachers to be part of tonight. I think with 4 of us being here, I think that shows our trust in you guys in doing this as well. And we don't have a bunch of teachers showing up to put in their opinion. We value your judgment and we value what you look at too. And so we thank you for going through this and we trust you. Good luck.
Thank you. So,
Yeah.
What do we want to do for travel? Do we want to put a dollar amount out there? I mean, Marshall is Fairfield, which is 4 hours, 5 hours. Roberts is probably 4. Rockton is halfway around the world. Long way. Rockton is probably
It's
further east on the
Yeah.
Fort Beckley is, yeah. So it's
a ways.
600 miles, probably 700.
I've seen anything from 2 to 500. Haven't seen a school district go above 500, but I have seen school districts offer to pay economy class airfare for out-of-state applicants in addition to a capped amount. But those are rare. Generally speaking, it's $200 to $500 capped.
And we can afford that.
I recommend they stay within that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would, the way our budget is, I would prefer not to pay anything, but I think that we have to, I mean, we have to get the good candidates. So I guess
Yeah.
I would think, especially where 2 of them are a long ways away, that we probably should look at the $500. I would think. Maybe that's too much. I don't know.
My goal would be 500 I'd like to get Mr. Rutledge here.
I would too.
So that would help him pay for a plane ticket. I mean, nowadays, it doesn't necessarily pay for the ticket, but at least most of it, I think 500 would cover everybody else. For sure. That's why, I rock these long ways, but it's like be $500 in gas, I don't think.
No.
And
Andrew, if we paid $500, I mean, when you contact them, can we express that we would like them to come in person, that's what we prefer, can we say that? Which I think we would if we could.
Sure.
Okay, is there anything else? Yes,
Question, I guess. If one of these folks decline, will you guys move to the next, ranking? And
generally, that's what you would
It's a
do,
great
or
question.
or regroup anyway and see, I envision, I mean, when you, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong or I'm out of line, but when we have interviewed people in past searches, I mean, the committee decides who they want to make the offer to, and you generally have who your second choice is and who your third choice is.
just talking like interview.
Yeah.
The interview process, say the Rutledge does not want to come out. Or
Oh.
do it or whatever.
Oh, then we put somebody else.
We'll wanna make sure we-
Yeah, so who's our five, just in case one of them declines?
Okay.
Who's our alternate?
That's a good idea.
That's a really
It
good
depends
idea.
on in terms of identifying alternates, that can get really hairy with getting some. And I would suggest that you not do that. If you say of these four, one drops out, you can still proceed with three interviews. I think you'd still get value from that. If you were to have two or three pull out, we'd probably kick it back to screening, and we'd be back here having the same conversation we have right now, which is identifying more individuals or deciding.
Any other questions? If not, then if someone would make a motion to bring those four candidates in for an interview with a travel allowance of up to $500. Somebody would like to make a motion? We can-
So do we need to name the people?
I think so.
I move that we bring Alex Ator, Josh Patterson, Tyler Rutledge, and Marshall Loggy in for encouragement of a in-person interview, not a requirement, right? And also in that motion, I include up to $500 reimbursement for candidates
Correct.
for travel expenses, for actual travel.
I would second that.
And moved and seconded. Is that okay, Andrew?
That sounds correct to me.
Okay. So to reiterate, the motion would be to interview Alexander Atoll, Josh Patterson, Tyler Rutledge, Marshall Laggy with a $500 limit on actual expenses. Is there any other questions or discussion? Those in favor, say aye. Aye.
I,
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody.
Chair, would you care to discuss dates at this point, or should we just communicate about that after tonight's meeting?
I think we should try to do dates if you have an idea, Andrew.
Sure. So with enough time to conduct reference checks on these applicants, that would bring us to early February. My only commitment the week of the 3rd is an ultrasound for my wife, who's expecting our first child.
Hey,
5, 6, 7, and 3 are all open.
tell me again.
The week of the 3rd, I could show up on the 3rd, the 5th, the 6th, or the 7th.
Wednesday, Thursday, or
You just, if it matters, Seed Squad is on the 3rd versus Twin Bridges. There is a home activity, and then on the 7th starts divisional wrestling. We have boys basketball for Frenchtown.
Do you think you would?
Not that affects anybody that could, but just FYI.
Do you think it would only be one day that you would meet?
So if we're interviewing 4 individuals, the comfortable way to do it, I think, would be to look at 2 interviews on the 5th, 2 interviews on the 6th, and deliberations on the 6th. We could compress that if you guys have conflicts and look at either packing them all into either day, the 5th or the 6th. How does that work for you guys?
is the 6th divisional basketball?
No.
So you just.
No, divisional wrestling.
Division.
Where's it?
Browning.
Yeah.
I would sure be okay doing the 5th and the 6th. Would you evening? deals or afternoon, or how do you? typically
Given
do
that
them?
you have in-state applicants who may have sizable drives, I would suggest evenings for them to get the drive out of the way. That way you're only covering gas, hotel for them, since they'll have to stay the night if they're driving 4 to 6 hours. And then they drive back the next day. I'd say evening, way to go.
And how long per interview?
Roughly an hour per interview. We used to say an hour and a half, but last season we had interviews lasting much shorter, even though boards had, mid or low teens for the number of questions. So I'd say an hour, 10-minute break between them, with enough time for them to show up and have tours if they show up early. Or maybe to have some sort of mix. But we can burn those up once we have the days.
When do we decide on what interview questions we're gonna use?
So right after we get done tonight, I'll get started on those reference checks and send the board that bank of interview questions. Take a look at those questions, read through them. We've had really good results with them. If you have a custom question you want to ask, feel free to propose that as well. We think we have most of the areas covered, superintendent searches, but it seems like every year we have a trustee present a brand new, wonderful question that we're really excited to add to the bank.
How many questions typically do we ask?
If you get past mid-teens, then you can run into length issues, especially if you have someone who is long-winded. One candidate will answer a question with 1 or 2 sentences. You'll have somebody else who will talk on it for 15 minutes. So what we found is as long as you keep that number low, you can pivot if somebody is being long-winded. But you don't want to have a really high variance in the length of these interviews, because people can use that to suggest that some applicants had more of an opportunity to persuade or make friends with you guys. But within reason, there is some variance.
So do we have to have a special board meeting to pick the questions then, or how do we determine that?
I'll send them to you as an attorney-client privilege communication. You can go through, tell me which questions you favor, send them back to me, and then I will provide the compiled set of questions to the board before the interview.
Okay, so each of the board members can pick the ones that they.
By number, you just tell me 1, 7,
Great.
okay, so perfect.
And then you will compile that and decide. Then when we do meet to interview with them, you will be here as well.
That's correct.
And you can be through by the nose again when I need it. Okay,
You're thinking we would do 2 on the 5th and 2 on the 6th?
Up to you. We can pack them all in or do 2 one day, 2 the next.
I'd assume do them all in one day.
I would too.
Give away.
I would too.
Chris, Nicole, how's that work for cabin and those sorts of things?
We should be slowed down in the second heat cycle by then, so. Give my wife and kids something to do.
I would prefer just, it's all fresh in your mind, you
Yeah.
have the 4 people there,
Yeah.
do the deliberation and the whole doggone thing is how I would prefer it. If everyone's okay with that. Lori, would that work for you?
I just wanted to clarify, Gary, I thought I heard you say earlier that you had, in the past, you had a subset of the board do the interviewing. Are you proposing at this point that you want all the board involved?
Yes.
Okay, unfortunately, I'm gonna be out of the country from the 4th to the 12th of February. So I would suggest that you move on and continue on with your schedule and not delay for me, but I don't want to put a wrinkle in your thought process.
Okay. Andrew, is that a problem if we cannot be here?
Mr. Chair, I think if possible, all trustees should participate. If we were to talk about a few other dates, we could also look at the previous week. So we look at the 26th or the 27th. Or no, hold up, I'm looking at the wrong one. So the prior week would be how does the 30th or the 28th?
Of January, the 28th or 30th of January?
30th is not great for me.
28th would work for me. Chris, that's good.
What day of the week is that? It'd be fine.
Maybe. Lori, would the 28th of January work for you?
Yes, it would.
Okay. So let's change that to,
We just have the C squad.
so we, okay. So we would do January 28th. What would you suggest, Andrew? Like 1 o'clock? 2:30, 4 and
I think,
5:30 or something like that?
I think if we went with, early to mid afternoon. That's
Just need to figure out how to structure the teacher
Right,
side of it.
Right.
We have a lot of teachers in.
Yeah.
In teaching
That's right.
during.
It also, in this way, I've got stuff that have, certain teachers that are here to partake, it sucks for them, so then you're in all four of them. Those two don't get.
It would be nice if you could all
Yes,
be there.
Yeah, just be us two. Okay. Yeah. If you guys are the ones that. Yeah, on the teaching staff decides sports.
What about having Audra participate? Is that an option? I think that would be
Oh, I
good.
think Audrey
I think it'd
definitely
be
should
really
be.
good.
Yep. Yep. Pardon?
Bishop Paul feels.
I mean, Rob should be there and Audrey should be there and Suzanne should be there, I feel.
Right, exactly.
With the 7 board members and with hopefully the same group of you guys, so.
Mr. Chair, I propose we keep the 5th in hopper as sort of a backup date, because the other thing that can happen is you'll have availability issues with this as well. So I'll propose the 28th, and then as a backup, if it looks like a majority of them are not available, we may have to go with the 5th. And I do apologize to the trustee who will be gone. When did you say your return date is, ma'am?
I'll be back in Wise River on the 12th. We get back on the 11th, so the 12th would be my first available day.
So that's what we'll do then is the 28th, and if they can't all make it, then do we
Well,
change them all to the 5th then?
I'll coordinate with you and we can decide, hopefully they're just all fit.
Right. Would the 12th be too long to wait? It's getting there, isn't it?
The 12th would really quick, it would stretch you out long enough that you were into hiring season proper.
Yeah.
But not be far enough that you're, toward the end of it, I guess.
Lori, as much as we would like you to be there, if we had to have it on the 5th and you couldn't be there, would you be okay with who we decide upon?
I trust all of you and I appreciate your making that accommodation for me, but if you need to move forward, you should move forward and I'll be there in spirit to support you.
Thank you. Okay, Andrew, is there anything else we need to do or talk about?
That's everything for me, Mr. Chair. I'm excited to be here with you guys and I'm gonna get these reference checks started, send you the bank of interview questions, and we'll see what happens.
Now, did you contact these 4 people right away?
Yeah, I'll contact them this evening, so they all
Okay.
know. Wow.
Okay.
Great.
And one thing I think Andrew kind of mentioned on is it is complicated if we know somebody, we probably shouldn't be calling those people for a reference. But if it's somebody that you think should be called, pass that name to Andrew, so Andrew can call that individual.
Yeah.
Correct.
Just to give you guys a sense of the process, we go through, we contact every reference that they've provided on their application materials. And then I usually try to at least double that number in individuals that I personally research from coworkers, other trustees on their boards. So it's not just people who are going to say nice things, it's people who are going to be honest with you about their performance and history. But if there is anybody that you think I should talk to, if you have any personal knowledge about these individuals, let me know so we can get that all running through the association and compiled in our checks.
Do we need to meet with you again before we start the interview process?
I don't think so,
Okay.
unless the sky falls in, have multiple people pull out. Fingers crossed.
But
knock on wood.
But as far as what we can ask or should ask or shouldn't ask or whatever,
That's all gonna be in the interview question.
that'll all be in the question.
Just so you know, Brockton is 8 hours and 45 minutes.
On good roads. Where in California is it?
That's the rough.
Okay. Yes.
Suzanne just did that too. Sorry.
So you do know how far it is. Any other questions from any of you folks? Thoughts? Caleb looks like he has something. Nothing? It's not like you.
Not a word, Chairman Love.
All right, if not, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn and thank Andrew for coming and all of you folks for coming.
I would move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
I.
Opposed. In the old JC days, we had time for the beer caucus. Probably not today.